There is a silence that lives inside certain people, a silence so heavy, so ancient, so carved into their bones, that you can feel it before they ever speak. It's not the silence of fear. It's not the silence of shyness. It's the silence of someone who has walked through a fire they never told anyone about. You can always recognize these souls, not by their wounds, but by the way they carry them. People who have suffered deeply move differently. They speak with a weight the untouched will never understand. Their eyes hold a depth that can't be faked, a depth that comes from witnessing the collapse of everything they once thought they needed in order to survive. And yet, here they stand, not because they were saved, but because somewhere in the wreckage of their life, they found something far more powerful than salvation, the will to continue. Jung wrote that only those who have faced their own darkness are fit to see into the darkness of others. Deep suffering becomes an initiation, a brutal awakening, a tearing down of the false self, so the real one can emerge from the ruins. This script is not about the pain they endured, but about the transformations that pain created, the traits forged in fire, the instincts sharpened in silence, the wisdom carved into them by nights they thought would never end. These are the 13 traits of people who have suffered more than they speak of, traits that reveal the kind of soul that has walked through a personal hell and returned carrying light. The first trait is a calmness that confuses people. Those who have suffered deeply do not fear small problems. They don't panic over petty conflict. They don't crumble under inconvenience. They've tasted a level of despair that rewired their nervous system. Once you've survived the unimaginable, the ordinary loses its power to intimidate you. Their calmness is not passive. It's earned. It is the calmness of someone who says, I've already lived through worse than this. Do you really think this will break me? They are unshakable not because life has been kind, but because life has already taken its best shot. The second trait is an ability to read people instantly. Suffering teaches you to observe. You learn to pick up on tone, silence, inconsistency, energy, the way someone shifts their weight. When they're hiding something, people who have suffered deeply develop a psychological sonar, a sixth sense, a hyper-awareness sharpened by years of protecting themselves from things they couldn't name at the time. This is not paranoia. This is pattern recognition. This is wisdom extracted from survival. While others get blindsided by betrayal, the deeply hurt feel the shift long before it arrives. The third trait is an unusual kindness, not soft, not naive, but intentional. People who have suffered deeply know what it feels like to be abandoned, ignored, dismissed, belittled. They know what it feels like to cry quietly, so no one hears. They know the weight of pretending they're okay when their soul is shattering internally. This is why their kindness feels different. It's not performance, it's memory. It's empathy carved from lived experience. It is the quiet, steady warmth of someone who says, I refuse to let another soul feel what I felt. But don't mistake their kindness for softness. Their heart is open, but their boundaries are steel. The fourth trait is boundaries, born from self-respect, not anger. People who have suffered deeply are often the ones who tolerated too much for too long. Too much disrespect, too much inconsistency, too much chaos, too much emotional debt. And one day, something inside them snapped. Not violently, kitedly. A quiet, absolute decision. Never again. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was awakening. Now they guard their peace like a sacred territory. They say no without apologizing. They walk away without explaining. They don't bargain with disrespect. They no longer set themselves on fire to keep others warm. Pain matured them. Boundaries protect them. The fifth trait is not wanting attention, only connection. People who have suffered deeply do not crave crowds. Noise feels like intrusion. Superficiality exhausts them. They prefer the presence of those who listen with intention, speak with depth, and see with clarity. They don't chase validation. Suffering already stripped them of ego illusions. What they want now is authenticity, alignment, souls that resonate, rather than faces that applaud. They can be alone without feeling lonely, because their solitude is no longer emptiness. It is sanctuary. The sixth trait is intense self-awareness. Pain forces introspection. You begin to question everything. Your choices, your beliefs, your patterns, your wounds, your triggers, your fears. Those who have suffered become students of their own mind. They learn the architecture of their trauma, the geography of their emotions, the history of their defenses. This self-awareness becomes power. It becomes the ability to stop cycles instead of repeating them. It becomes the ability to say, this is where the pain shaped me, and this is where I reshape myself. Their suffering turned them into analysts of their own soul. The seventh trait is a fierce sense of responsibility. People who have suffered deeply stop waiting for rescue. They stop waiting for apologies. They stop waiting for closure. They learn painfully that no one is coming. So they become the hero of their own story. They take responsibility for their healing, their growth, their future, their mindset, their habits, not because it is easy, but because they've already seen what happens when they don't. Suffering taught them that self-responsibility is the doorway to freedom. The eighth trait is an intolerance for superficiality. Small talk feels empty. Shallow relationships feel suffocating. Fake positivity feels insulting. Forced happiness feels dishonest. People who have suffered deeply want to speak about meaning, patterns, the mind, the soul, human nature, pain, healing, hope, the parts of life people hide behind filters. They have no desire to play social games. They have seen too much, felt too much, lost too much, to waste time on the trivial. Their depth was not a choice. It was a consequence. The ninth trait is gratitude that comes from survival, not idealism. People who have suffered deeply notice things others overlook. A calm morning, a stable friend, a moment of peace, a gentle conversation, a soft breath after crying. They are grateful, not because life has been easy, but because they know how quickly it can collapse. Their gratitude is real because it was earned in the dark. The 10th trait is an ability to endure what others avoid. Suffering teaches patience. It teaches endurance. It teaches the art of sitting with life, even when it makes no sense. People who have suffered deeply become warriors of the unseen world. They endure emotional storms with the stillness of someone who has weathered far worse. This endurance is not a burden, it is mastery. The 11th trait is a strange combination of softness and strength. They can comfort you with a tenderness that melts your defenses, yet stare down their own demons with a courage that would terrify most. Their softness comes from compassion. Their strength comes from survival. Together, they create a presence that feels both safe and formidable. People who have suffered deeply are gentle with others and ruthless with their own growth. The 12th trait is the ability to adapt, to rebuild, to rise. Deep suffering destroys the old self, but in that destruction lies the potential for rebirth. People who have suffered deeply learn how to start again, reconstruct, redefine, reclaim. They become architects of their own identity. They reinvent themselves not once, but repeatedly, each time emerging more whole, more conscious, more aligned. Suffering didn't just break them, it reshaped them. And finally, the 13th trait, the most powerful of all, a profound understanding of others' pain. People who have suffered deeply become healers without trying, not because they fix others, but because their presence says, I have been where you are. You are not alone. They radiate a quiet wisdom that cannot be taught, a recognition that cannot be faked, a compassion that comes from knowing the terrain of suffering intimately. They are the kind of people who save others without ever saying a word. Pain forged them, loss shaped them, darkness refined them, suffering awakened them. And now they move through the world carrying a depth that frightens the shallow and comforts the broken. These are the people who have suffered deeply. And if you recognize yourself in these traits, know this: your suffering did not end you. It transformed you. It expanded you. It gave you vision, clarity, intuition, empathy, and a soul carved with wisdom. You are not damaged. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are forged. And so the story continues, not of the pain that shaped you, but of the person you became because of it. There is something profoundly mysterious about a soul that has suffered deeply. They carry an aura, a presence that does not need to be explained or defended. It simply is, like the shadow of an ancient tree, standing alone on a quiet hill, its roots gripping the earth with a strength invisible to the eye. People who have suffered carry their history, not as chains, but as gravity. You feel their depth before they speak. You sense their resilience without knowing their story. You recognize their strength not by what they boast, but by what they refuse to be disturbed by. Their suffering made them see the world through a different lens, a lens that pierces through illusions, a lens that refuses to be fooled, a lens sharpened by every night. They whisper to themselves, just one more step, just one more breath. Those steps, those breaths, those nights, they didn't break them. They initiated them. And this initiation creates something that cannot be taken away, a maturity that doesn't come from age, but from endurance. People who have suffered deeply rarely hate those who hurt them, not because they are saints, but because their suffering broadened their understanding of human weakness, human fear, human confusion. They see the truth behind cruelty, a truth many never learn to recognize. Cruelty is not power. Cruelty is weakness trying to disguise itself. Those who hurt others are rarely whole. They are fractured beings, acting from their own invisible wounds. The deeply hurt know this instinctively. Their suffering gave them X-ray vision, not over bodies, but over human motives. They see the trembling insecurity behind arrogance. They see the desperate craving for love behind manipulation. They see the abandoned child behind the adult who lashes out. They see the unspoken grief inside every explosive temper. Suffering made them perceptive, almost to a fault. They don't need explanations. They feel the truth behind the behaviors. And this creates an unexpected compassion, not out of pity, but out of understanding. Another trait emerges, the ability to sit in silence without trying to escape it. Most people fear silence because silence forces them inward. Silence exposes their loneliness, their regrets, their unprocessed emotions, their unmet needs. But people who have suffered already faced those inner storms. They've sat with their own shadows when no one else would. They've cried in rooms where the only witness was their reflection. They've confronted the full force of their own mind until they learn to tame it. Now, silence is no longer a threat. It is a companion, It is in silence, where their soul rebuilds itself, where their intuition sharpens, where their spirit speaks, where their peace regenerates. They do not fill silence with noise, distractions, or validation seeking behavior. They let silence become a doorway to their inner world, a place both sacred and unshakable. People who have suffered deeply also develop an unusual relationship with trust. They don't trust easily, not because they are bitter, but because they are attentive. They trust slowly, carefully, deliberately, like someone placing fragile glass on a high shelf. They watch patterns, not promises. They observe consistency, not charm. They value actions, not apologies. They wait for truth to reveal itself with the patience of someone who knows exactly what it costs. To give trust to the wrong hands, to the uninitiated, they may appear guarded, but their guardedness is not fear. It is wisdom. They'd rather take time to understand someone than rush into a connection that fractures later. Their trust is rare, but once given, it is loyal, fierce, and enduring. And because they trust so carefully, they love with an intensity that feels almost otherworldly. Another trait of those who have suffered deeply is their ability to appreciate the ordinary in a way most people overlook. A quiet morning, a meal that nourishes, a conversation that feels safe, a moment of laughter, a sunset that paints the sky, a night without overthinking, a day without old wounds resurfacing, a breath that doesn't ache. For most people, these are background moments. For those who have suffered, they are proof that life can still be gentle. Their eyes linger on things others rush past. Their gratitude is not performative, it is visceral. It lives in their bones. Because when you've spent years hoping for moments like these, you never take them for granted. But perhaps the most striking trait, the one that resonates at the deepest frequency, is the way people who have suffered deeply show love. Their love is not shallow, it is not habitual, it is not transactional, it is intentional, it is sacred, it is fiercely authentic. They don't love with conditions, but with presence. They don't love with expectations, but with depth. They don't love loudly, but with a quiet force that transforms the room. When they love someone, they see them, all of them, the surface, the hidden, the beautiful, the flawed. They love not because they need to, but because they choose to. Their love is mindful, not mindless, healing, not consuming, rooted, not impulsive. The deeply hurt become the deeply loving, not in spite of their pain, but because of it. They know the cost of being unloved. In moments when they needed it most, they vowed to never let those they care for feel that void in their presence. Their heart is a cathedral, built from every broken piece. They learn to bless. And then there is the trait that separates them from the world entirely, a refusal to collapse in the face of adversity. They've already collapsed once. They know how hard it is to get back up. They know the darkness that swallows you when life breaks you open. But they also know something most people only discover too late. They know their own strength, not theoretical strength, not motivational strength, not Instagram quote strength, but the strength of someone who has tasted despair and still rose, the strength of someone who rebuilt themselves with trembling hands, the strength of someone who discovered in the ruins of their own life an unkillable piece of their spirit. And once you know your own strength, nothing external can defeat you again. Life may shake them, but it cannot shatter them. Pain may revisit, but it cannot own them. Fear may whisper, but it cannot guide them. People may disappoint, but they cannot dismantle the foundation. this soul built within itself. Those who have suffered deeply have a resilience that feels supernatural to those who have not walked their path. But it isn't supernatural. It's earned. And now the final truth emerges. The truth that explains all 13 traits and everything they became. People who have suffered deeply carry a different kind of soul, a soul tempered by fire, a soul expanded by struggle, a soul refined by loss, a soul awakened by endurance, a soul that no longer seeks escape, but seeks meaning, a soul that no longer avoids truth, but embraces it, a soul that no longer fears the dark because it has learned to generate its own light. And you, if you recognize yourself in these traits, if your spirit trembles with recognition as your mind absorbs these words, then understand this: nothing about you is an accident. Nothing about your resilience is random. Nothing about your depth is coincidence. Nothing about your perception is accidental. Your suffering was not your identity. It was your initiation. It burned away the shallow parts of you so your real self could emerge. It carved you into someone capable of seeing life as it is, not as illusions painted to be. It turned you into a force that life itself cannot bend easily. You have the traits of someone who has survived storms that would have drowned others. Now you walk with a spirit that the world feels long before it understands. And so the path deepens, carried forward by the quiet, unspoken truth that those who have suffered deeply are not merely survivors, they are transformed beings, marked by an inner evolution that others can sense, even when they can't explain it. Their presence lingers, their energy resonates, their silence speaks, their resilience humbles, their depth unsettles the shallow and comforts the broken in the same breath. The world often misreads them. They are labeled mysterious, intense, old souls, because language fails to capture what pain has sculpted within them. They are not mysterious. They are aware. They are not intense. They are present. They are not old souls. They simply grew faster because life demanded they mature before they were ready. Suffering accelerates the soul. It strips away illusions in a way comfort never could. It forces revelation, forces growth, forces honesty. And that honesty becomes their compass, a compass far more reliable than anything the external world can offer. People who have suffered deeply walk with an inner compass that rarely fails them. This compass is not intellectual. It's not logical. It's not built from books or mentors or inspirational quotes. It is built from nights when they had no one to rely on but themselves. Nights when their soul became its own guide. Nights when they were forced to sift through the rubble of their mind and find something, anything, that was still true. Truth becomes the foundation of their inner world. Not convenient truth, not comfortable truth, but the raw, unfiltered truth that life carved into them without permission. This truth becomes a gravitational field that aligns every part of their life, their relationships, their ambitions, their habits, their boundaries, their silence, their presence. Once you've suffered deeply, you no longer move from impulse, you move from intention. You no longer move from fear, you move from clarity. You no longer move from loneliness, you move from discernment. And this discernment becomes one of the most powerful traits that deep suffering bestows. People who have suffered deeply are masters of discernment. They don't just see what people want them to see. They see the subtext, the patterns, the inconsistencies, the contradictions, the emotional fingerprints left behind by someone's true intentions. They don't need dramatic evidence. A single tone shift, a single flicker of insecurity, a single unguarded expression tells them more than 100 explanations. Their discernment is not cynicism. Cynicism is rooted in bitterness. Discernment is rooted in wisdom. It's the ability to say, I see you clearly. And because I see you clearly, I will choose how to engage with you. And this is why people who have suffered often seem distant or hard to get close to. They're not distant. They're selective. They're not guarded. They're intentional. They're not detached. They're observing. And this observation isn't judgmental. It's protective. They learn the hard way that not everyone who approaches comes with pure intentions. They learned that some people are drawn to their softness, their empathy, their patience, not to cherish it, but to drain it. So now they choose carefully who gets access to their heart, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. Another trait emerges subtly. They know how to be alone without being lonely. Suffering strips you of illusion and forces you to meet yourself in your most vulnerable state. Most people go their whole lives avoiding this meeting. They distract themselves with noise, with people, with work, with drama, with anything that keeps them from hearing the sound of their own soul. But people who have suffered deeply were left alone with their soul, long enough to recognize its language. They learned to sit with it. They learned to listen to it. They learned to walk beside it. Even when the world couldn't understand them, their solitude became their teacher, their healer, their sanctuary. Now, they don't fear being alone because they are no longer strangers to their own inner world. Their solitude is not emptiness, it is richness. It is where their clarity forms. It is where their intuition whispers. It is where their spirit regenerates. It is where their resilience grows roots. Solitude is where they became whole. People who have suffered deeply also develop a trait that often goes unnoticed, but transforms everything about them. They stop needing external permission to live truthfully. When you suffer enough, you eventually stop asking, is this okay? And start declaring, this is who I am. You stop seeking approval for your boundaries. You stop softening your truth to keep others comfortable. You stop shrinking yourself to be accepted. You stop contorting your identity to avoid losing people. Suffering teaches you that losing yourself is far more devastating than losing anyone else. And so they walk in authenticity, not the packaged, fashionable kind sold on social media, but the raw, uncompromising authenticity born of survival. They don't fear being misunderstood anymore. They don't fear being disliked. They don't fear disappointing others because they've already lived through the worst version of rejection, the rejection of their own needs. They won't go back. People who have suffered deeply become dangerously honest with themselves. They don't romanticize the past. They don't lie about their weaknesses. They don't pretend to be better than they are. They don't hide their feelings behind masks. Their honesty is not cruel. It is cleansing. It is the honesty that destroys illusions, that frees them from repeating mistakes, that allows them to evolve without dragging old identities along. This is why their growth is rapid, why their healing is profound, why their transformation feels inevitable. Once you are honest with yourself, nothing can hold you back. Your fears lose their grip. Your wounds lose their poison. Your past loses its power. Your patterns lose their invisibility. Self-honesty is the root of every breakthrough. Deep suffering forces this honesty, long before most people ever reach it. And then there is the final, unspoken trait, the one that radiates from them. In everything they do, in every step they take, in every choice they make, Those who have suffered deeply carry a soul that refuses to give up. They've been broken in ways they never deserved. They've been abandoned in moments they needed someone most. They've cried in silence until their tears ran dry. They've rebuilt themselves from fragments of who they once were. Yet they rise, not gracefully, but relentlessly, not perfectly, but authentically, not quickly, but permanently. Something inside them refuses to die, refuses to yield, refuses to let the darkness win. This refusal is not stubbornness. It is the soul remembering what it was made from. It is the echo of ancient strength. It is the fire of human resilience. It is the force that suffering awakens. In those who are chosen to walk the harder path, people who have suffered deeply are not weak. They are the strongest beings alive, because life has already tested their limits, and they transcended them. And whether the world sees it or not, whether others understand it or not, whether they themselves realize it or not, they are unstoppable now. And so the journey draws toward its quiet, inevitable crescendo, not because the story ends here, but because every soul that has suffered deeply eventually reaches a threshold where pain is no longer the author of their life, but the ink that taught them how to write their own destiny. This is the moment where suffering transforms into something transcendent, where the wounds stop bleeding and start teaching, where the past stops haunting and starts shaping, where the sorrow stops crushing and starts revealing, because those who have suffered deeply learn a truth that cannot be taught in comfort. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is your initiation. It's the forge that burns away the superficial. It's the pressure that forces you inward. It's the darkness that reveals your light. It's the chaos that awakens your clarity. It's the breaking that reveals the parts of you that cannot be broken. All the traits forged in you, the calmness, the discernment, the compassion, the boundaries, the depth, the intuition, the resilience, these did not arrive from happiness. They arrived from survival, and now they serve as the architecture of the person you have become. But here is the final secret, the truth whispered only to those who have walked through their own hell and chosen not to stay there. Suffering may shape you, but it does not define you. You are not what happened to you. You are not the cruelty you endured. You are not the losses that broke you. You are not the moments you thought you would never rise from. You are what you became after those moments. You are the decision to continue. You are the courage to heal. You are the wisdom extracted from agony. You are the clarity born of darkness. You are the strength that refused to die. Your suffering is part of your story, but it is not your identity. It is your origin, not your destiny. And the world feels this in you. Whether you speak about your past or not, they sense the quiet power. They sense the grounded presence. They sense the depth behind your eyes. They sense the unshakable steadiness of someone who has endured storms that would have shattered others. The world may never know what you walked through, but they will always feel what it made of you, because suffering does not return you to who you were. It births a new version of you entirely, a version that knows peace because it has survived chaos, a version that knows love because it has endured loneliness, a version that knows truth because it has been lied to, a version that knows strength because it has been broken, a version that knows freedom because it has known captivity. And this version of you, the one standing here now, still breathing, still evolving, still rising, is untouched by anything that once threatened to destroy it. Here is your ending. You have become the person your suffering was preparing you to be, not hardened, but awakened, not cold, but conscious, not bitter, but boundaried, not wounded, but wise, not lost, but luminous. Deep suffering carved you into someone rare, someone real, someone resilient, someone radiant, someone powerful. And now, at this point in your journey, you carry something few human beings ever discover, a soul that survived its own darkness and learned how to shine anyway. Walk forward with that light, not as a survivor of pain, but as a master of it. Not as someone who was broken, but as someone who was reborn. Not as a product of suffering, but as the embodiment of what exists after suffering. You are not done. You are beginning, and the world has not yet seen what a soul like yours is capable of building. Go forward with the quiet knowing that you carry within you the most powerful truth a human can hold. You have suffered deeply, and because of that, you are unstoppable now.